By now, most of you already know of my storied history of a certain phone that got recalled because of battery issues. Ever since that saga ended, I've been looking for a new daily driver, and I'll be honest, there hasn't been a lot of contenders vying for my daily driver spot. Until now. Enter the LG V20. Since the demise of the Note 7, I was forced to revert back to my Sony Xperia Z5. But ever since switching back to the Z5, there are a few features from the Note 7 that I missed dearly. Things like the higher resolution on a 5.7-inch screen, the 4 gigs of RAM, and the Snapdragon 820 processor. And when the Z5 started acting up out of nowhere, I felt it was time to start looking for a different daily driver. And by pure coincidence, LG offered to send us their latest smartphone, the V20. Inside the box, you'll find the LG V20, a quick start guide, a USB Type-C cable, travel power adapter, and a battery. Next, an exterior tour. The LG V20 comes in 3 colors, silver, pink, and this one right here is Titan. The V20 measures 159.7 millimeters tall, 78.1 millimeters wide, and 7.6 millimeters thin. The phone weighs in at 174 grams. On the front of the device is where things get a bit more interesting. There are 2 displays on the front, one 5.7-inch 1440 by 2560 IPS screen, and a secondary display that measures 2.1 inches and has a resolution of 160 by 1040 pixels. The entire front is covered with Gorilla Glass 4. Next to the secondary screen, we have the 5-megapixel front-facing camera, and just a little bit above the second screen is the earpiece. On the right-hand side, we have the back cover release button, and on the left-hand side, we have the volume rockers. At the top, there is an IR sensor and microphone, and at the bottom, we have the stereo headset jack, microphone, USB Type-C port, and speaker. At the back, we have the dual LED flash, the wide-angle 8-megapixel camera, the standard 16-megapixel camera, laser autofocus, and finally, the power/lock/fingerprint sensor. Taking off the aluminum back cover reveals the removable 3200 mAh battery, a nano SIM card slot, and micro SD card slot that can be upgraded up to 256 gigs. Let's talk specs. The LG V20 sports a Snapdragon 820 CPU, Adreno 530 GPU, 4 gigs of RAM, and has either 32 or 64 gigs of storage depending on the model you end up with. This one in particular is the 64 gig model. All this plus it's running Android 7 Nougat. That's right, one of the first phones to receive the newest Android OS that's not a Nexus or Pixel phone. Let's move on to the user experience. Now the first thing I usually do when I get a new phone to check out is run it through some benchmarks. In this case, it was Geekbench and Antutu. In Geekbench, the LG V20 received a single core score of 1599 and a multi-core score of 3815. Now comparing those scores to the S7 Edge, the V20 doesn't fare too well. In terms of compute results though, the LG V20 scored 6868 versus the S7 Edge, which got a 2503. With the Antutu benchmark, the LG V20 scored 148,309, which is higher than both the Note 7 and the S7 Edge. The overall feel of the LG V20 is quite a different experience compared to the Note 7. While the phone is thinner than the Note 7, it's also 5 grams heavier. However, the aluminum back cover on the V20 was more slippery in my hands compared to the glass back panel of the Note 7. Next up, the secondary display. I really like the secondary display. For me, this was LG's innovative way of implementing an always-on display without having to use the primary screen like how Samsung implements theirs. On the second screen, you get to see your notification icons, control music that is currently playing when the main screen is off, and there are some shortcuts like turning on and off Wi-Fi, the flashlight, Bluetooth, switching sound profiles, and a great screenshot tool that doesn't necessarily have you fumbling with a combination of button presses. And if the primary screen is on, there are also app shortcuts as well. One neat feature of the secondary display is that you can set your signature here. I, of course, chose my Twitter handle, but the one downside is that the signature takes over the spot where the clock should be. Bah! Who needs to tell time, right, when you have your Twitter handle? Moving along. The V20 also has a few more tricks up its sleeve. First up, the customizable home bar. Yep, you can rearrange the home buttons into whatever configuration you like, whether it's back button on the left, back button on the right, it doesn't matter. they're not hard buttons, so you can change them up. You can even add extra buttons to the bar if you want, like the notification pull down button and quick apps button called Q Slide. Speaking of adding or removing things, you might notice that straight out of the box, the V20 has the apps drawer missing by default, but with a quick change in the settings menu, you can get it back fairly easily. Like I mentioned earlier, the LG V20 does run on Android 7 Nougat, which means it has multi-window mode. This is something we've seen for a while with Samsung Note devices, but it's finally here for other Android phones that run Nougat. Now, to use two apps at the same time with the multi-window feature, touch and hold the recent apps button while using an app. This feature doesn't work with all apps though, so just keep that in mind. Another neat trick is Mini View. With Mini View activated, you can have a more compact screen space for one-handed use. This was super helpful if you're standing on the bus and you need to text someone while holding on for dear life. To get Mini View mode started, turn it on in settings, and then all you have to do is either swipe right or left on the home button and the whole screen will shrink and shift. Speaking of shrinking and shifting, LG's stock keyboard also allows you to adjust the height of the keyboard. Whether you want it super tall or super short, this is an awesome feature to have that's usually only available through third-party keyboard apps like SwiftKey. The camera setup on the LG V20 is pretty straightforward, with the exception that it has a normal camera and an extra wide-angle camera built in. Now, with the normal camera, you can capture up to a 75-degree angle. With the wide angle, you get 135 degrees. Also, the selfie mode is pretty fun. All you have to do is hold up the camera, hold out your hand and make a fist or open your hand, and in seconds you get the perfect selfie. Afterwards, just bring the phone towards you, and it will immediately show you a preview of what the last shot looked like. It's a pretty cool feature, LG. I like it. Battery life with the V20 has been pretty standard for a flagship with a battery of this size. I managed to squeeze about 2 full business days before having to recharge the V20. But running low on battery juice isn't a big issue since the V20 supports Quick Charge 3.0, and I usually have a power bank with me or a quick charge adapter nearby. But if you happen to have a spare battery for the V20, you can swap them out because it has a removable battery. I mean, removable batteries are such a rare sight to see these days, they're almost unappreciated. But V20, I appreciate you. And up next, media consumption. The 5.7-inch IPS display does not disappoint. Great viewing angles and awesome color reproduction for video playback. For the loudspeaker, it reached a decibel level of 70.8, which is louder than my Z5 but quieter than the Note 7. But still loud enough. But what really puts the LG V20 ahead of the competition is the built-in hi-fi Quad Dac for listening to music through wired headphones. Now, I'm not claiming that I'm the biggest audiophile there is, which is why I'm going to describe the built-in DAC in 2 words. Mind-blowing. Like, let me explain with a story time with Jack. Now, for those of you who aren't aware, it snowed a lot in Vancouver in the month of December, and I was unable to drive at all due to poor road conditions in my neighborhood, and I was forced to take public transit for over 4 consecutive work weeks. But it was this very weather experience that allowed me to really test out the LG V20 and what the built-in DAC can do. With the DAC off, the listening experience was average, nothing really going on with the highs, mids, and lows. But with the hi-fi DAC turned on, there was a noticeable difference. I'm talking clear mids, poppin' highs, and warm bass. Every other phone maker out there needs to have a built-in DAC like the V20 has. Heck, if you buy an LG V20, you should turn on the DAC function and never turn it off. To be honest, I'm actually kind of mad at LG now because I have to give this unit back and then I have to go back to my Sony that has no built-in DAC once this review is done. LG has just ruined mobile audio for me. Unless someone at LG wants to give the Jack some special treatment and maybe give Jack a belated birthday / Christmas present that may or may not be an LG V20. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Eh? Okay, so enough gushing about the audio on the V20. Now, to be honest, I didn't want this review to end up as a comparison with the Note 7, but I couldn't help it. If you recall, in my Note 7 review, I called the Note 7 the near-perfect phone. Now, how did the LG V20 stack up? First up, The pros. It runs Android 7 Nougat, which the Note 7 did not have. It does have a Snapdragon 820, 4 gigs RAM, a large 5.7-inch screen, and fingerprint sensor, just like the Note 7. It's got an easy-to-use dual camera setup, a removable battery, a secondary display which somewhat mimics Samsung's always-on display, but LG's version, I feel, has a bit more functionality in such a smaller screen. And of course, the wonderful built-in DAC that I was just gushing about earlier. And the cons. No iris scanner, no stylus, and no IP68 certification. The lack of the iris scanner and lack of stylus are offenses that can be pardoned because that's not what the V20 is about. But the missing dustproof and water-resistant certification is a feature that more and more phone makers are adding to their flagships, and I truly believe that if the V20 had an IP rating, it could truly stand toe-to-toe with other flagships. But sadly, it doesn't. You'll just have to be more careful when you're near a body of water. After everything is all said and done, if you're interested in the V20, it costs roughly $830 US, depending on which carrier you buy outright from. Whereas in Canada, the V20 is roughly $1,000, so it has typical flagship pricing. NCIX does sell the dual SIM version of the V20. Links will be down in the description below. The LG V20 is a solid performing smartphone with a great emphasis on audio for headphone users. I would like to thank LG for lending us this unit for us to check out. It has definitely won me over, and I'll be looking into getting one as my daily driver. That's it. Thanks for watching. Click here for previous videos. Follow us on Twitter over there. But as always, like the video if you liked it. Comment down below for fans with benefits, and subscribe for more videos like this from NCIX. We'll see you later.